Alright, so today in this video I'm going to be doing a trace of another web page of this web page actually. This is wclovers.com, the front page for a WordPress plugin which lets you build an entire marketplace inside of WordPress. This page I chose because it is pretty simple, but it is pleasing to look at, and it's a kind of a style of page layout and setup that's in demand. It's corporate. It's like to promote a product. It's real clean. Apple does their pages like this with this two-column, an image over here or over here, and then a header with some simple information, and that's the whole thing. No long paragraphs, no large bodies of text, just high-impact sections, broken up with lots of white space. I really like it. I'm going to take you through and build out visually every piece of this step by step from top to bottom, and I'm going to only use the free version of Elementor. I've got a page of Elementor open here, and we're just going to do it one section at a time. I'm going to ignore the header, and I'm not going to do the footer either. I'm just going to do page content. So let's start with this top section here. So the challenge in this top section is to get this big full width background of this green swoosh here, to make it stretch all the way across. And then I'm going to have a two-column section here. This section looks pretty wide. If I look at the content down here, this content is clipped in a little bit, and it continues to be at this width, but this top content here is a bit wider than that, so I got to pay attention to that. Inside of these two columns, I have a big dominant header here, probably my H1, and then I've got a couple of buttons here with some styles, and then I just have an image. And it looks like that this image occupies a little more than half the page, so not exactly centered on my columns. So with all that in mind, I'm going to come over here. The first thing I'm going to do is click on our red plus and make a two-column section. Oops. And I'm just going to go through these sets up here one at a time. I'm going to start on the layout tab for this section. The first thing I'm going to do is stretch the section, and that'll set the bounds of my section all the way across where we need them. The content width, I'm going to change it to full width, and what this does is this changes the width of your columns. Right now they're inset a little bit in a boxed state. I'm going to go full width and let them come all the way out to the edges of the section. And I'm going to ignore most of this other stuff. I'm going to give it a minimum height just so that we can sort of see what we're working with. 400, I'd say a little longer than that, almost double maybe. I'll do 700. And that's all I think I need to do on this side. Let's go to the Style tab. So I've got a background here, and the background is this big green swoosh. Before I did this, before I started this video, I came to this website and I farmed out all the assets. I took them all and I saved them in a folder, and that's definitely something that you should do if you're designing a site, is get all your assets together. And I've actually already uploaded them all to this website, to the media of the WordPress site. So when I come into background and I click on classic and I select an image, they'll all already be in my media library ready for me. So here we go. I've got the hero background image. I'm going to insert that, and there it is. So the trouble we can see here is that this swoosh is cut off. Down here it goes all the way down. So I just need to adjust the positioning of it a little bit. I'm going to change the position right here below the image. I'm going to say bottom center. That'll center the image and anchor it to the bottom. That's perfect. I'm going to say the attachment, I'm going to leave the attachment as default. If I put fixed, it lets me scroll past it, but I'm just going to leave it as default. And for repeat, I usually put no repeat. And for size, I choose cover. And that means that it'll stretch to the longest side. It won't inset, it won't cut off at any point. It'll just stretch to the longest side. I could choose contain, and it'll stretch to the shorter side, but that doesn't look as good. I'm going to go to cover. Okay, so that's our background. Let's start adding some elements. We've got this header and these two buttons. Let's start with this side. I'm just going to click on our Rubik's Cube up here. I'm going to grab this heading, and I'm going to grab a button, and let's grab another button. I'm just going to put it right there. So let's add our content. This says, create a marketplace with WooCommerce the way you want, with a capital U. I believe that's how that goes. And I've got, it's all white, got a bit of space between this text here. And so let's add those two elements here. Over on style, first thing we'll change the text color to white. And then we'll go into typography and style it out as best we can. So this site makes use of the Poppins font. All the elements are in the Poppins font. It's a beautiful font, very easy to read, looks nice on the website. So I'm going to set all of my elements to Poppins. It's a Google font. You get it free to use with Elementor or with anything that supports Google fonts. And the size I've taken down, I'll bring this over here so you can see just this once. I've also, in addition to recording all the images and assets, I've recorded my styles. For this header, this top header, it's a size 45. The line height is 1.5 EM, which is just a unit of measure you'll become familiar with in web design. And its weight, which is its thickness, is 500. So I'm gonna move this off screen, but I'm gonna copy those into this typography area here. Set that size to 45. Set my weight to 500. It's starting to look pretty similar. And let's do a line height 1.5. There we go. And I'm going to do one trick here to adjust this U that is not kitted with Elementor. I'm just going to use an HTML tag right here. Open and close that bold tag on either side of the U, and that'll give me that bold selectively just on that U there. That looks pretty close. I'm going to pull this column. I'm going to grab the space between these columns and pull this in a little bit. Something about right there. Let's say right there, 35%. Very close to thirds. Probably will end up being thirds. And let's do this button here. So we have two buttons. This first button is red. It's got a gradient background, and it's got, you can see maybe you can see it in the video, the last couple of pixels on the outermost edge of the button are a darker red color. It's got a bit of a stroke when hovering, I guess. So let's do this. I'm going to change this text here. First of all, I'm going to go to the style tab. I'm going to go ahead and make it red. I'm going to choose background color on the button tab here. I'm just going to drag that up, make it a little easier to see. That's probably about what it is. Click again to release it. I'm going to go back over to content. Let's type this out. Start for free. Okay. All right. Back over to style tab. Let's change the text color to white. And then we're going to cross this little line here and look at border type. I'm going to choose a solid border. I'm going to give it 2 pixels actually. And I'm going to make this just a bit of a darker red. Just like that. Let's have a look. Getting pretty close, pretty close. So this let me go and show this gradient background here. That's not something I can do on a button in the free version of Elementor. There are numerous plugins and extensions and things you can get to adjust buttons in this way. But because I can't do a gradient with free Elementor on a button, I'm just going to leave it just like this. I'm going to turn this border radius up. Border radius is the curve of your corners. So I click this up, see I'm getting rounder and rounder, and I think about, it looks like anything over 23 will do it for this size of button. I'll just go to 25 in case it's stretched for any kind of screen. And then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to turn this hover state on. Turning the hover state, adjust the settings for everything above that first bar that we crossed. And what this does is it lets you set styles for when the mouse is over the button. So I'm going to change the background here, make it say a little lighter. And now when I hover over it, it gives it a little bit of a, you're hovering over this. So that's pretty close. I'm going to delete this button right here. And I'm going to, you saw that button automatically flows to below this button because the blue bounds, the space that the button occupies in line, is all the way across the column. To make them stack sideways, one here and one here, I have to get rid of this space. I have to tell this button to position in line. And I'll do that by going over to the Advanced tab. And then I'll come down here to Positioning, Width, Inline. Once we do that, we're ready to go ahead and duplicate the button and make another one. So I'll just go ahead and right click here and duplicate. And as you can see, it flows to the side on the right instead of filling up the whole section here. So this button has, looks like a white outline, and it's got a transparent background. It says try our demo. Let's go to style. Let's change this background color. All you have to do is clear it. I'm going to grab this transparency slider. I'm going to pull the opacity all the way down, and I'll click off. We have no background in this button. We do have a hover background though. And we've got a very thin stroke. This border here is white. Just leave it like that, and I'll go to my hover state, and I'll change the background color to a light gray, something like that. Let's see, how does the, I'll click off of that, let's go look. Hover state changes this text to green. In addition to recording all of my text styles, I also took down some common colors used on the page. These are color hex codes. If you know about color hex codes, they are just some letters and numbers put together, and each of them correspond to a specific color. You can use them in color selectors like this. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to text color here for this button that I'm working on, and I'm just going to paste it. Oops. And that'll give me this specific green that they use repeatedly on this page. And now that's pretty close to the way our other button works over there. I might just go ahead and make this button white on hover. I think that's how that works. So the only last thing that we need to do with this column is separate these buttons a little bit. We got to give them a little bit of space. That's probably about 30 pixels, maybe less. To do that, I'm going to go back to this button, and I'm going to adjust in advanced, under advanced. I'm going to adjust the margin. I'm going to unlink them. When they're linked, they all change together, all four sides. I'm going to unlink it, and for the right side, the side between these buttons, I'm going to just add 30 pixels. And I'll click off and see how all that looks now. Pretty close. I might have overdone it, but I'm not going to sweat that. For the right side, just a big image right here, this big transparent image. So I'll just go to my Rubik's Cube, add an image, just drag it in there. I'll select the image. Where are we at here? Here it is. All these people partying around this big marketplace. Okay, and for size, I'm just going to put custom, and I'm going to leave all of this information blank. All right, so the last thing is let's make all of this content that now looks right, let's position it right. We've got a bit of space between the top and the top of this image, and this is more centered rather than in line with the top of the content on the right. So those two things we'll control with the section. Edit the section, and I'm going to come over to the advanced, and we're going to adjust the margin and padding. The margin is the space between this box and everything outside of it. The content underneath this box, it's got a good deal of white space there. It's about 100 pixels. So I'm going to add 100 pixels to the bottom, and that'll just push this box down a little bit. If I take that away, you can see it move back up. Just going to push the lower content down below. And then for padding, I'll leave them linked actually, and I'm going to select EM, which is a text-based unit of measure. And I'm just going to turn it up until I've got, what this is doing is pushing in the sides, the top, and the bottom all together. That looks about right, about 5 EM. Just come over here to layout, and for vertical align, which is the way things are aligned from top to bottom, I'm just going to choose middle. You can see what that's done is that's just pushed the content to center with everything else. It's aligned everything to the center. I'm going to try and position these things a little more accurately. I'm looking at two places. I've got these feet down here, and I've got the space between the top of this image and this circle, and in fact the top of this entire section here. I'll collapse this bar so you can see, and if we look over here, that's pretty close. Her toes down here, and there's a bit more space between these two. So I'm just going to mess with padding a little bit more and try and get these things together. I'm going to unlink these values, and I think I'm going to bring the bottom up by reducing the padding there. Something like that. Let's have a look. That's a bit closer. A bit closer. And then let's adjust the top padding a little bit. Ooh, I might turn that up even. There we go. And I think I'll give a little bit to the right and the left also. And let's have a look now. Pretty close. And I'll pull this column over a little bit to try and get these text breaks when I'm on full screen. Just a little bit wider. Let's see how we flow. Okay. That's very close. Very close. Just trying to get close. Alright, so this section down below, the next section, we're gonna encounter our first set of pretty consistent elements. This little green bar here, this header that's all capitalized, and then this little bit of body text here, that's gonna be a common element. We're gonna see this several times. So I'm gonna make this right the first time, and then we can just reuse it over and over again where it occurs again. So the first thing is this green bar. You can make that. Let's make a new section, full width. And I'm going to stretch this section also. And I'm going to leave this content boxed. Boxed is to constrain page width of the content. And then I'm going to go over to my Rubik's Cube. Let's add the first element. I'm going to need a divider element. Unlike a spacer, a divider creates space with a line. I'm going to shrink that down. I'm in the content tab on this divider. I'm going to bring this down to probably about 5 or 6 pixels, or not pixels, I guess. Let's put it in the center. And I don't need any other elements here. Let's check style, see what we have over here. We have color. I'm going to grab my, my common green color again. And I'll paste this in. And let's make the weight, which is the vertical thickness of it. Let's just bring this up. Maybe just 5 pixels there. Let's have a look. Maybe only 4 pixels. And for gap, gap is the space that the divider occupies. So it's very close to this header. So I'm going to give it no gap. We'll see what we get. Might make it just one more tick longer. Okay, so the next element is this big header here. And I'll just go ahead and copy the contents of it. I'm going to bring all that in. Click on the Rubik's Cube. Let's grab the header. And I'll select up here in my content tab and paste. And I'll let this be an H2 and I'll center it. Okay, over on the Style tab, it's already black, so I don't need to change the color. In typography, I'll change this also to Poppins. And let's set this size. This is an H2, so its size is 36. Let me check my styles here. So I've got a line height of 1.4, weight of 600, and I'm transforming to uppercase. Oops. So that's a weight of 600. Looks like about what it was. Transform to uppercase. There we go. And line height of 1.4. That seem right? Looks pretty right. I think I will make this black. Yeah, there we go. Okay, no text shadow, no blend mode, and I think probably I could bring this text and this upper bar a little closer to each other. I'll do that by selecting the divider and editing it. I'm going to go over to advanced, and I'm going to pull that bottom margin up. I'm just going to unlink those values and pull this up until it's sitting on it like a little hat. I think my line height has added a little bit of space. I can adjust it even more by editing the header, unlinking that, and pulling the top margin down. Something about right there. That looks right to me. And we need this body text here. I'm going to go to the Rubik's Cube, grab a text editor, just throw it down there, paste it, and it's centered, I believe. It is. Okay. So the body text doesn't need a lot of adjustment. We'll set it to Poppins also. I believe it may already be. and it's usually size of about 16. And what do I have here? Looks like line height 1.8, letter spacing 0.7 pixels, and weight of 400. Set our weight to 400. Line height of 0.8, a lot of space, letter spacing 0.7. Just little subtle changes that make it what it is. I'm going to change the text color to one of our common grays. In this case, I'm going to do 55555. I don't need this hashtag, but I'm going to put it. Okay, let's have a look. Pretty close. This is in only 2 lines here, so maybe I take this section, and when I box them, I box it a little wider. There it is, 1220, and we'll use that as the default width for sections from now on. What I've done is I've just selected the section in layout. For the content width, it's boxed, and I just manually set it to 1220. I think the default is 1200 if you don't put a value in there. Below this, we have a series of these sort of card-like elements. And what I'm going to do to make these is just use intersections, just make columns and style the columns to have these sort of, this drop shadow here, this curved corner. We're going to do it just like we did for the buttons. And then inside of that column, I'm going to build out a little icon element here. I'll just use body text for this. I don't think that's dominant enough to occupy a header, and some body text for that also. So let's do it. I'm going to grab the intersection element. I'm just going to put it right here beneath the text. I'm still using this same top level section here, or our second section. I've got 2 columns in my intersection. I'm just going to throw one of them away. I'm going to work with just one of them for now. The first thing that I need for as far as content is this icon, then 2 little snippets of body text. So I'm going to grab an icon, and I'll grab some body text, and I'll change this right now to say store hours and vacation, all capitalized, in the center. A little bit of body text here. Rubik's Cube, grab it, put it right here. And we'll center this also. Everything's way too spaced out. We'll mess with that in just a minute. Let me get the styles for the background for this column. I'm going to right click and edit the column. And then I'm going to go over to style. And there's not really a background. It has a white background. So I'm going to go to border. Just do a box shadow. There we go. Already you can see it a lot better. This box shadow is actually pretty faint. Almost you can barely see it. So I'm going to turn the opacity pretty far down. Maybe about a 0.2. We'll try that. But it's a little bit wider than that. It spreads out a little farther. So I'm going to increase the blur. Something to do about that. I'm going to pull my spread in a little bit. Spread is the reach. Blur just is the fade. That looks about right. I don't know how well you can see that on the video, but I think that looks about right. Maybe even too strong still. Select this column, go back into my tools here, and then I'm going to set my border radius. I'm just going to click up and look at my corners until I see it. I think 25 is where we settled on the previous curve. That looks okay to me. Maybe a little less. I'll just leave it. That's okay. Alright, let's set our styles on the objects inside. This object, I'm not using the exact image. I'll change it to an icon that looks like that. For icons, you can just, once you have the element set, just click on it. You have a whole pile of searchable, elements and objects and things like that that you can use if you don't have an image for something simple. The one that we're using is a store. So I'm going to select store, insert, and we'll just use that. I'm going to change the style, the color. Let's put my regular green in there. Okay, and then That should do it for the icon. I could make it a little bit larger. I'm just guessing, you know. I'll put 50 pixels. I'll put 60 pixels. Alright, so let's style this, this section down here. This looks like it is just regular font and a thick weight. So I'll just go Style, Typography. Let's bring this weight up, say 500. A little bit more than that even. 600, a true bold. And I'll leave the rest of this. It's just a card, it's not a big deal. Make it a little bit smaller. Looks about right. Okay. So then the final thing is the space between the edge of this column and the contents inside of it. I need to adjust that a little bit. Try and get them a little more centered. Let's go to edit the column. I'm going to go to advanced. I'm going to choose EM again for padding. I'm just going to turn them up. I'll just put 2 clicks worth, 2 EM. Let's bring this a little bit closer. Editing my icon, I'm going to adjust the margin for this. I'm going to shrink that bottom margin to try and bring that title up a little closer. How close are we? I don't know, ½ centimeter maybe? Something like that. I don't know, pretty close. And I'm going to do the same thing to bring this body up to the title. Go to advanced. And just pull that bottom up. Something about like that. Okay. And now, the final thing is to duplicate this column. Oops, I forgot to set my margin on the right and on the bottom. So I'll delete that and let's do that real quick. What this does is it pushes the next column out a little bit. On the right, I'll do 15 pixels. And to keep everything centered, to make sure it stays centered on the page, I'll put 15 pixels on the left side as well. We'll see what I mean in a minute. And then for the bottom, I'm going to do a full 30. What this is going to do is, for columns to the right of this column, it'll have 15 pixels of blank space, and then this column's 15 pixels of blank space. That'll make 30 pixels total. So there's the 30 pixels, and here's our bottom 30 pixels. I'll just duplicate that again. How many do we have? Do we have 4? Duplicate that again. Pretty close. And then we have beneath it another 4. So I'm just going to grab this entire section and duplicate that. And pretty simply, we have it. There may be a little more space between this body text and these cards. Looks like there is. Let's add that at the body text. Go to advanced. Turn this margin up a little bit. Oops. On the bottom. The next thing after these is this little looks like an icon and some text here. A link to go outside. A bit of space between these two here. So I'm gonna grab something called an icon list. You can do this any number of ways. I'm just going to use an icon list because Elementor has this element and it pretty much creates what we need. I'll click open this single list item. I've removed the other two that come as the default. Choose an icon. Let's search for arrow. There it is, I think is the exact icon. Okay, and this says view all features. Alright, let's go style it. I'm going to go ahead and align it to the center. And let's style the icon. Put my, I should say WC Lovers, standard green as the icon color. Might make the icon a little bit larger, I believe it is. No, it's not. It's pretty small. And let's do the text. This text looks a little tighter together, a little bit smaller. And it is black. Here we go. Something like that maybe. probably about right there, let's say. I'm going to reduce my letter spacing just a little bit. I'm just eyeballing it here. It's a little thicker too. Let's do a 500, maybe a 600 even. Probably only 5. And then for decoration, we'll underline it. That ties it off pretty nicely. Pretty close. Pretty close. Could probably be. Yeah. All right. That's that whole section here.